Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I am back with another review, and that review is of the March buddy read of my book club. My book club is of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, and we read one book a month that mostly is adult fantasy written by women and genderqueer folks, but every now and again we do read the odd one out and just branch out into the general SFF genre, and this one was one of those exceptions. The book I'm talking about is Womb City by Tlotlo Tsmasa, and this book I first read because it came across my timeline, and I read it because of my Read Around the World challenge that I'm doing. I read it for Botswana because the author is Botswanan. Is that the right term? I don't know. Anyway, she is from Botswana, and then I loved it so much, so I put it on a poll for my book club, and my book club chose it for March. And so I once again was able to make people read a book I love, which I very much enjoy. And I also enjoy when the book club chooses books that I have already read, which doesn't happen very often because I usually only pick books that I haven't read yet. Anyway, Womb City is a story in the general genre of Afrofuturism as well as dystopian. It's also kind of a paranormal thriller, well, thriller horror type novel, so there's a lot of genres and subgenres coming together in this book, and I absolutely loved and adored it and ended up giving it 4.75 stars. This review, as always, will be spoiler free, so I will refrain from talking about specific spoilers. And yeah, let's get into what this story is about. As I said, it's a dystopian, it's set in this futuristic world, and there's two things you have to know about the world. First, body hopping is now a thing. So most humans do not just spend one lifespan on Earth, but they can spend multiple lifespans on Earth and hop from one body to the other. The second thing is that in Botswana there is a system set up where you have the, I forgot what it's called, the water of something, and through this thing you have a system of criminal surveillance. So you have people who have committed criminal acts, and once they commit criminal acts, they are incarcerated in a virtual prison. The bodies of those criminals are then microchipped and fed back into the body hopping system. However, they are now under constant surveillance, and basically they cannot commit criminal acts. Before they commit criminal acts, the system will know and they will be incarcerated. Our main character Nela lives in such a microchip body, and so she has to go through a lot of tests basically daily, letting her husband go through her memories and stuff and trying to hide the things that she doesn't want her husband to know, like that she is having an affair. When one night she's out on a joyride with her affair, things start going south fast as the microchip system seems to fail, and the two of them end up in an accident and end up killing a woman. And then the ghost of said woman starts coming after Nela and her family for vengeance. And so there's just a lot of stuff going into this book, a lot of stuff about being a woman in a society under constant surveillance, a lot of stuff about just personal responsibility, but also just state responsibility. There's a lot of stuff there. So let me talk to you about my thoughts and why I ended up loving this book. First, a little disclaimer. I did not read this book physically. I read it via audiobook, which I do think is part of the reason why I enjoyed it as much as I did. I do still think that I would have loved this book if I had read it physically. However, I think I might have only given it 4 stars or something, because I remember, I started the audiobook only because I didn't know when the physical copy would come in, and I wanted to finish the book in February. And usually I don't enjoy audiobooks as much as reading physically because I can't pay attention a lot of the time. However, with this book, I had a very easy time paying attention, and when my physical copy came in, I thought about switching, and I tried switching to the physical book, and I just couldn't. I just had way more fun with the audiobook. Part of the reason possibly also is, I talked about that theory in my last wrap up, that I think with some stories, especially stories that aren't necessarily written in a very westernized voice, and often, I wouldn't say white voice, but a voice where I can connect my inner voice to it a lot, which happens with obviously a lot of Western stories, but stories that are written in a non-Western context, a non-Western voice, a lot of times I have an easier time getting into the story via audiobook because my inner voice doesn't fit the story. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me, okay? So I read it via audiobook and I absolutely love the audiobook, can highly recommend it. Also, the average rating for this book on Goodreads is not good. It's like 3.3 stars or something. I will talk, like, because I went through some of the reviews on Goodreads, I will talk about some of the criticisms and why, for me personally, those criticisms were actually like good things for me for the book. So yeah, just to be aware. Also, there's a lot of complaints about like typos and stuff. However, most of those reviews were of ARCs, so yeah, anyway. So let's start maybe with what I disliked about the book. I think like maybe some of the world building of the exposition was repeated too often. However, I do think that it was a conscious world building choice, and a lot of times like it made sense, and for me it didn't personally bother me. However, I did see that as one of the big criticisms, that you have the same things, like the system of the body hopping is repeated a lot of times with how it works. However, I did think that in a lot of the expositions there was always added like a little something new. But yeah, so you had the repetition in the book, but the way it felt like, and with how often it felt very intentional for me, but just be aware with that. In general, the exposition seems to be one of the biggest gripes of people reviewing this book, in that it can be very exposition dumpy, which again, I do agree with. It didn't bother me whatsoever. Like, I remarked upon it when I listened to the audio, that I was like, wow, that feels like it's very much stopping in the middle of the scene, not within action scenes usually, but it's stopping in the middle of the scene to give us an exposition dump. This is written in first person perspective, so like Neela giving us an exposition dump and then continuing on. However, since the way the world building was given to us was always relevant to the scene that we were in currently, I didn't mind it. And again, it did feel kind of intentional to me, and it fit with the story for me personally. However, I can see how, if the particular style of how the exposition is done in this book isn't your cup of tea, how you might have troubles with that every now and again. Something that I personally had, like, which was my biggest issue with the book, which was why I ended up giving it 4.75 stars, is that I found the ending was very, very abrupt and very quick. Like, there was a lot of build-up throughout most of the book, and then the end was just the last chapter and then it was over, or the last 2 chapters and then it was over. And so yeah, it was very horror, I think, because horror doesn't necessarily always have the drawn out endings that more high fantasy stories have, obviously. But yeah, it was a little abrupt for me personally, so that's why I ended up giving it 4.75 stars. However, now to the, what do I call it? To the positive stuff. I did really love the world building. I love the world building a lot. Like, there's so many elements to the world building, and a lot of elements that maybe don't feel necessary, but that I just really appreciate, because in a way, and in aspects of it, this book very much is about a fight between genders. It's about a fight between genders and also classes. It's about how women and men are treated differently by a society where maybe gender differences shouldn't even be that much of an issue anymore, because you have, for example, womb incubators, so incubators where you can have a baby outside of your own body. However, even though this thing exists, Nela, as someone who should be able to get a child, who is a cis woman, so who has a body with a womb, is still very much treated terribly for not being able to carry a child to term. Which actually, do go look up the trigger warnings for this story, because, for example, miscarriage is a big topic in this entire book and in this entire story. And so it's just this really interesting thing, because it kind of shows how illogical oppression is, and how much oppression isn't about logic, but it's really about power. So I love that. And even though it was really about this relationship between men and women, how they're treated differently, how they have to move differently through society, it's also like the book doesn't neglect other forms of oppression, even though there maybe isn't the space to explore those fully in this story. You still have a mention of how trans people are treated, you have a mention about non-binary people, you have a mention about how this new system of body hopping, etc., how that changes how disability is viewed, because there's now an additional element through which disabilities, and having physical disabilities, for example, becomes undesirable. So there's a lot of elements there that I just really, really appreciated. And yes, the exposition is very divisive in the way it's done, I think. However, I really appreciated it. And while I do agree to a certain extent with the criticism that I've also seen of it, and that I've also seen in my own comment sections, etc., of that the plot and the world building seem to be a little bit divorced, and for me also at some points they just deviated maybe too much from each other. Like, it seemed like the stuff that was explored within the world building wasn't necessarily explored within the plot, within the like thriller horror aspects of the plot. I still ultimately really enjoyed it, because it felt like the way the plot, like, what's it called, developed, that's what I looked for. The way the plot developed wouldn't have worked without how the world building was set up. So ultimately it did come together again, and yeah, I just really loved it. I really enjoyed like the world building, the plot, the exploration of oppression and oppressive systems, etc. I also really loved how, especially at the beginning of the book, Nela very much is an unreliable narrator, because the story is narrated through first-person perspective, so we get Nela's point of view, and Nela has made herself very comfortable in her life at the beginning of the story, even though she's really not happy. And so she becomes this almost unreliable narrator, where in the relationships to her husband especially, you can't really be sure if what she's saying is her actual opinion or if she's just telling herself that. And Nela in general, I love Nela because Nela is not a likable character. She is kind of really egotistical, and she makes a lot of really good points in terms of oppressive systems, especially with her affair, who belongs to like the richest 1%, and through that just has like very little to worry about within the system. So she constantly calls him out, but on a personal level, Nela is also constantly out for her own gains and to live a life as comfortable as possible and to not challenge the system. And so, like, she does sometimes challenge the system, but yeah, it's just this very interesting dynamic, which I think make her like an incredibly interesting main character. I saw a lot of criticisms that part of the reason why people hated the book was Nayla, because she was so unlikable and why should you root for her, etc. And I don't think this book is necessarily about rooting for Nayla. Like, she is a woman who is determined to get away with murder throughout this story. That doesn't necessarily make her a likable character, and I don't think it's supposed to make her a likable character. I don't think it's just this very interesting like dynamic where you want her to get away with what she has done because you know about how oppressive the system is and what the system will do to her if she's found out. But also she just fucking killed someone. And so it's just a very, very interesting dynamic. And I also think it's part of the reason why the tension in the story is built so expertly. Also, there's just there was like one twist that I don't think I really saw coming that made me almost cry, definitely tear up, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? I hate this, but also I love this. Yeah, I just loved it. Also, the other characters I found very enjoyable. I think I forgot what the name of the affair is of Nayla. I think Janil or something. Loved him, found him such an interesting character, and yeah, I really enjoyed the book. There's nothing more I can say about it. I thought this is really well written, really well done. The pacing I found good with the audio personally. Again, with the audio, take some things with a grain of salt because obviously books read differently audibly than they do physically, and a lot of stuff is also due to the narrator, which, like, I found the narrator did the story really well. But yeah, I can highly recommend this, and I hope more people will pick this up. And with that being said, tell me in the comments down below if you have read the book, what were your thoughts on it? Are you more like more on my side, or more on the side of seemingly all of Goodreads? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club will be linked down below, so go and check those out. If I still upload this in March, maybe you can still join us on buddy reading this. And so yeah, with all of that said, I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!